these next three chapters, chapters 24, 25, and 26, are going to present the three temptations of the Anointed One. Three temptations that David is now going to face. So, of course, I'm going to slow down and do 24 tonight, and Lord willing, 25 next week, and Lord willing, 26 the week after that. But I want to have you see this overview that we come to this moment now where we're going to see David presented with some very strong temptations. And these temptations, I think, are highly relatable then to the pictures of what we're going to see regarding Christ and the temptations that he goes through as well. So keep that in mind as we look at this chapter and we notice the events as they unfold, as we see then as David is the Anointed One and what he is going to be tempted to do in the similarities then in regards to Christ. And then, of course, we will talk about the message for that, which is going to be the title of the lesson, Don't Take the Shortcut. That is very important in this lesson, is that we not take the shortcut. But let's notice how that plays out. As chapter 24 opens, you might remember at the end of chapter 23, we saw that King Saul has David basically in his grasp. He is doomed. He has him surrounded at a mountain. And we see that a messenger come to Saul and say, well, the Philistines have come in for the attack, clearly the hand of God, so that Saul takes his armies and leaves, even though he has David at that moment. He has to leave, allowing David to be able to flee. As chapter 24 opens, that Saul comes back from chasing the Philistines. And big surprise, somebody tells David's gone to En-gedi. It seems like everywhere David goes, everybody tells Saul, well, here's where David's at. Go get him over there. So that's where David is trying to hide in the wilderness of En-gedi. Please notice, it's really interesting. Chapter 24 does this. It starts with David's in the wilderness. Chapter 25 does this. David is in the wilderness. Chapter 26 does this. David's in the wilderness. He's trying to tell you, don't forget where David's at. He's in the wilderness when this is about to happen. So David is in the wilderness. Saul is seeking in verse 2. 3,000 of his soldiers are going to try to find David. And remember, David has about 600 men at this point, and they are out there hiding. Verse 3, absolutely hysterical. As you're going about trying to look for David, you have sometimes nature calling, and that's what happens at this moment. Verse 3 tells us that Saul, by happen chance, goes to a cave to go relieve himself, which happens to be the very cave where David and his 600 men are hiding. Now, when you think of a cave, don't think of some small carved out like you would surely see it. Think of a deeper cave if you've been to some like in the south or up north, kind of thing like that, where you can get deep into the recesses. It just so happens that where Saul is going to use the restroom is the very place where David and all his men are hiding in the very back. My translation says in verse 3, he went to relieve himself. The Hebrew is better to conjure the wording. It says that he had his legs covered. So that tells you what's going on here in this scene. That's the way the Hebrew reads it. So imagine now this moment. The one who is trying to kill you is in a terribly vulnerable position. And that's what happens here in verse 4. The men of David said to him, here is the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do it to him as it seems good to you. So I want you to notice what David's men do at this moment. They say, this is your chance. You can finally end this nonsense. All of this running around and running for your life and trying to get away from Saul, you can solve the problem. And notice how they frame it. The Lord has given Saul into your hand. And not only do they frame it that this is the Lord's doing, they say, didn't the prophecy say that this was going to happen? You see that there in verse 4, that here is the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do with him as seems good to you. Now, I don't read that anywhere. So I read that with a touch of skepticism.
when the men say, God told you that this moment was going to come, that you could dispatch of him however you please. I go, I did read that, but okay, maybe that happened, but I don't think so. I think they're taking this moment and saying, since you're the anointed, obviously God has given you the opportunity to seize the moment. Clearly, as the anointed one who should be the rightful king to take your place on the throne, God has turned him over to you for this moment to strike him down. You'll notice at the end of verse 4. So David arose and stealthily cut a corner of Saul's robe. And afterward, David's heart struck him because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Now, it's really important that we frame what happened here, because we can miss the idea of what's taking place here. So David kind of sneaks up and behind him there and gets part of his robe and cuts it off. And the very next words are David's just overcome with regret. He's just can't believe that he did that. And why is he so upset about that? You really ruined the royal robe, and how dare I, take a little chunk off of it like that? That's not what's happening here. Nor is David just, playing a game with Saul. I'll cut off his robe, and, that'll be kind of funny to show that that's not what's at play here. A couple of things that are important to observe. Number one, in ancient Near Eastern times, if you cut the robe, that was a symbol of disloyalty and rebellion. And we understand that to be true here, because remember, robes have played a very important part in this book. Remember how it all started when Saul was told about his sin with the Amalekites. And you have Samuel turning away to leave Saul. Saul grabs Samuel's robe and tears it. And remember, Samuel says that's a prophetic message, that the kingdom had been torn away from you, that this robe represents the kingdom. And that's what Samuel does there in the moment. Remember, Jonathan does the same thing. Jonathan goes to David and gives him his robe and his weapons and everything that's on him, symbolizing, I'm not going to be next in line as king. David, you will be next in line. And so he's giving him his robe, all of his princely garments, to indicate Jonathan's understanding that David is the prince. He will certainly be the next king. Remember also, in Saul's rebellion, as he's trying to find David and kill him, Saul seeks David where Samuel was with all of the prophets, and it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul, so that Saul took his robes off and laid on the ground naked, prophesying, indicating God was taking the kingdom away from Saul. What's happening here is David is doing something that appears to be a seizing of the kingdom. And that's why he is overcome with regret as soon as he does it. It's not, we marred his clothing. But this was emblematic. This was a statement. This was an essence of, I'm coming for you. I'm going to seize this kingdom. I'm going to take my rightful place. And I want you to notice that's exactly what David says in verse 6. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed. Well, how did David put out his hand against him? He didn't even touch him. He just touched his clothes, because it was emblematic. It was emblematic of coming against the Lord's anointed. I am seizing this kingdom from you. I am tearing it from you, thus cutting the robe. That was ancient Near Eastern understanding, and it's been the understanding throughout 1 Samuel. In fact, so much so the case, verse 7, so David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. He turns around and he tells them, you are not going to touch him. And the ESV, I think, is kind of light with the word here. I think it's interesting. When it says that David persuaded his men, this Hebrew word often has the meaning of tearing apart or dividing. And so, as I have on the screen, the NIV reads it as, he sharply rebuked his men. The NRSV reads, David scolded his men severely. The idea is he kind of verbally tore them apart for giving him the idea that he should go after the Lord's anointed. He goes and cuts the robe, regrets it. I'm not going to raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to seize the kingdom. I'm not taking it for myself. And how dare you guys tell me to do something like that? You're not going to touch him because he is the Lord's anointed. That's what transpires at this moment. Now, as the story continues on, end of verse 7, Saul finishes up and leaves the cave. And as Saul is leaving, we're told that here in verse 8, David comes out after him and he starts calling for Saul. Saul, Saul. Saul turns around, and wouldn't you know it, he sees David in verse 8 on the ground, my Lord the King, and he bows with his face to the earth and pays him homage. You see this reversal of, I'm not coming against you. And what David does now in these next statements is to prove his loyalty to Saul. In verse 9, David said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of men who say, behold, David seeks your harm? Saul, this is really number 2. Number 1, he's on the ground, face down, calling Saul, my Lord the King. Number 2, Saul, why are you listening to people who are telling you that I'm out to kill you? That's not the case. In fact, verse 10, behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave, and someone told me to kill you. But I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the anointed. So he says, I've proved my loyalty. I had you in that cave. In fact, my men said, kill you, and I didn't. And let me prove it. Verse 11, see, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand, for by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. And now he asserts his loyalty in verse 12. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you. But my hand shall not be against you. So he says, let God be the avenger, not me. You've done me wrong, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Let God be the avenger, but I'm not going to touch you. Verse 13, as the proverb of the ancient says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. In short, I'm not wicked, so I'm not going to do such a wickedness. And then verse 14, after whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? David says, I'm a nobody. I'm just a nobody here. Why are you pursuing me like this? I'm not out for your harm. Stop listening to people who say that you are. I had a chance to kill you at that moment. In fact, my men encouraged me to kill you. I didn't do it. Here's the proof. I have part of your robe. I'm not a wicked person, so I would not do such a wickedness. Let God be the avenger, and I will not avenge myself. And who do you think I am? I'm a nobody. I'm not after you. And notice the response that happens. In verse 16, as soon as David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? Saul lifted up his voice
and wept. And he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. And you have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me therefore by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." And David swore this to Saul. And then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. All right, let's talk about what happens here. As David just makes this impassioned plea for his loyalty, and I'm not out to hurt you, I'm not out to harm you, I'm not going to kill you. And Saul, it just seems like he finally gets through yet again for a moment in tears to David. "Is that you, my son?" And then notice what Saul begins to say as he deals with this situation. I think it is so interesting how Saul responds to David. Verse 17, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, for I have repaid you evil." Here Saul acknowledges, "David, you haven't done anything wrong by me, even though I've done evil to you, and I've tried to kill you, and I've made your life miserable. You have not done so toward me." In fact, it's pointed out, as he says in verse 18, "You had your chance to kill me. The Lord put me into your hands, and you didn't take it." And it kind of dawns on him in verse 19, because he says, "For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe?" No. If David saw Saul as an enemy, then he would have taken the moment and killed him right there. Saul recognizes, obviously, "You don't see me as your enemy." And not only that, but then notice verse 20. I think perhaps some stunning clarity on Saul's part, where Saul now confesses, "I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand." Remember, all of Saul's effort has been to ensure that David is not king. Saul is trying to maintain his reign and ensure that Jonathan will take the throne after him. That has been what all of the rage has been about from Saul toward David. And notice the confession. You are going to be the king. It will be that the kingdom will be established into your hands, so much so that he has David take an oath. When you become king, this is an important oath. When you become king, do not hunt down my family. Do not chase after my children, grandchildren, none of my family. I do not want you to exterminate my house. I want you to be faithful to them and do good by them. And verse 22, David swears this. That would come into play in 2 Samuel and toward the end of 1 Samuel. This will come into play quite a bit. Very important oath that's being made here between Saul and David. But I do find the end of verse 22 fascinating as we wrap up the narrative of this. As you will notice, it doesn't say, and Saul and David went back to Gibeah, or went back together back into Judah. Saul, he goes home, and David and his men back to the stronghold. At this point, I think David knows that he just cannot trust Saul, because Saul at any given moment has changed his mind. This is the third time Saul has said something like this, where Saul has said, "Oh, you're right, I repent, I won't chase you anymore." And then the very next page, that's exactly what Saul starts doing again. And so you see that here. This time, David does not return with Saul. He's not going to do that. He goes back to a safe place, into the stronghold, while Saul then goes home. Now, a couple of things we're going to talk about. What we've been doing every single time as we've come to this text is we've talked about these important pictures that we see of the anointed. And the temptation pictures here, I think, are overwhelming and absolutely amazing in terms of the parallels between what David experiences and what we're going to see Jesus experience. The first picture of temptation that we see
is that we're going to see that the anointed will be presented with the temptation to seize the kingdom for himself. This is what David is presented with. Here is your chance. You can take the kingdom now. You can go ahead and have it for yourself. Kill Saul, be done with him, take your rightful place to be king, even as God has told you. Please note that this temptation happens to Jesus frequently. One of the notable ones, you might remember John chapter 6, verse 15, after we have the feeding of 5,000, John's account has it, everybody, the multitudes are thronging to him to make him king. And it says that he went away to a quiet place and left. Wasn't the time for that yet. And so he avoids that moment. But also consider in the wilderness the temptation that the devil presents to him. The devil takes Jesus in Matthew chapter 4, verse 9, to a very high mountain, and the text says he shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Okay, so imagine it. Here's all the earthly kingdoms and all of their splendor. And here's the temptation he gives in verse 9. All these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me. What's the temptation? The temptation is this. You can avoid the suffering and establish your kingdom now. Why go through the difficulty? Here's Satan. You don't have to go through the pains of living this life for the next few years of people rejecting you. You're a human. How demeaning that you would have to be in this form. Just seize the kingdom for yourself now. You can do it. Just bow down and worship me and I'll give it to you. And certainly you don't need a cross. You can avoid the cross to be enthroned as king. Just bow down right now. If you would just bow down before me, I'll make you king. I'll give you all the glories of these kingdoms of earth. I'll give them to you right now. No need for suffering. No need for pain. No need for nails. No need for cross. No need for scourging. No need for mocking and rejection. We're at the very beginning of the ministry. Just take it now and avoid the pain. That's what David's being presented with right now. Let's end this nonsense. Just be king. Stop being on the run. Stop living in the wilderness. Stop having to starve, you and your men. Just go take that throne. It's rightfully yours. Well, that's what Jesus is being presented with. Seize the kingdom. Ascend to the throne. Take your rightful place. And that's why it's so powerful that you see Jesus going, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bypass the will of God. I'm not going to bypass the suffering. I'm not going to bypass the difficulty. I'm going to do things God's way. Such an important picture that is given here. And just as David passes the test of not seizing the kingdom for himself, Jesus as the anointed will do likewise. And he will not seize the kingdom for himself, but he will wait until the proper time when God bestows it to him. That leads to the second temptation that we've seen in this text. That is parallel to the anointed. The first is that the anointed is going to be tempted to seize the kingdom for himself. The second is that the anointed will be tempted even by his own men. How interesting that the temptation actually comes from his own men. There in the cave, it is his own men who say, this is your chance. You can take it for yourself. It's been put right into your hands. The Lord has given you this day to be able to make you king at this time. David's men encouraged David to seize the moment against Saul. Now, the parallel of this is very important because it's a scene to us that I think we can sometimes struggle with why Jesus responds in one of the most harsh responses you will ever read him give. One of the hardest things he will ever say. is when his own disciples tempted him. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. You see the temptation? Jesus is saying, I'm going to suffer many things and be killed, and he's showing them how it's all going to play out. And Peter's saying, you don't have to go through suffering. That's not your path. You're the Messiah. You're the anointed one. Why would you go down the path of suffering? And that's why Jesus gives such a strong response to Peter. Get behind me, Satan. For you are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. This is really an important declaration about the temptation that is being put before Jesus all throughout his life, is avoid the suffering. When Jesus is saying, I have to suffer, his disciples are saying, no, you don't. That doesn't make any sense. That can't possibly be. And here's Jesus saying, no, that's exactly the way it has to be. Do not tempt me to avoid the suffering. Don't tempt me to avoid the cross. Don't tempt me to avoid all that is going to come with coming into glory the way God has called me to. And I want you to think about even the parallel of this, that just as David had to verbally tear his men apart, so now Jesus turns on Peter and does the same thing. He says, get behind me, Satan. He tears him apart. You don't have your mind on the things of God? How awful would you? You are a hindrance to me. You got it all wrong, Peter. That's not the path to glory. That's not the path of what it will take to be the anointed. Third, in the temptations that we see, is that the anointed will entrust his life to the Father. When David says these words in verse 12, powerful words, may the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you. But my hand shall not be against you. You have David saying, I'm going to leave it to God. God is going to avenge me. God is going to deal with this. But I'm not going to do something of my own power, my own might, for my own self. I'm not going to do that. And remember what the Apostle Peter wrote. And speaking of Jesus, he committed no sin. Neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Same picture. Jesus doesn't take matters into his own hands. He's entrusting his life to the Father. The Father will be the one to take care of this. In fact, the parallel again, where David says that the verse right before that, I have not sinned against you. I have done no wrong or no treason in my hands. This claim of innocence, which is perfectly portrayed in Christ as completely innocent, and instead trusts himself to God to be the one who will vindicate. All right, so what's the message for us? Two things. Could be 40 things, but we'll go with two tonight. Two really, I think, very important messages here. First, very important message. We must not assume that opportunities equal divine approval. We must not assume that life opportunities equal divine approval. That's the mistake these men make. Because the opportunity is there to kill Saul, that must mean that's the Lord's will. And it wasn't. It wasn't the Lord's will at that moment for David to slay Saul. That was not why that was put before him. In the same way, Jesus has the opportunity to accept Satan's offer. Here, take all the kingdom. Just bow down to me. Here's the opportunity to avoid your suffering. Go ahead and take it. But obviously, opportunity was not divine approval. It is so important that we remember, that we understand. Opportunities can be temptations. Opportunities can be opportunities to sin. Many opportunities are exactly that. Is a temptation being put in front of us, and therefore every opportunity requires spiritual discernment. We cannot simply assume because I have the ability to do something or the opportunity to do something that means it's God's will to do it. Rather, it may be an opportunity to your own spiritual destruction. And David and Jesus understood that. They understood that just because I have a chance to do something does not mean that we should do it. I'm so fearful that so many times I could hear Christians say that because I have the opportunity to do something, that must mean it's right. It must be God's will. So if I have that opportunity, therefore I need to take it. And that's not true. So many opportunities are Satan's opportunities to tempt us. Satan's attempts to try to get us to turn away from God. We must be so spiritually careful and absolutely spiritually discerning when it comes to making these kinds of decisions, especially when you realize your advisors, your spiritual advisors, can be absolutely wrong. David's men were wrong. Jesus' disciples were wrong. You would look at them and go, oh, they're right. I need to listen to them, right? No, you shouldn't. They're absolutely wrong. They're wrong in the advice that they're giving to David. They're wrong in the words that they are saying to Jesus. And it is so important that we then recognize that we need the humility to seek God's will and not our own will. We like to reverse engineer God's will. Here's what I want to do. I pray, and then I go do it. God must have been wanting me to do that because the opportunity is still here. We be really careful about that. So often we can make life decisions and say, well, God wants me to do something, when in fact, that's your will. That's what you want to do. And we're just trying to figure out a way to get God to rubber stamp it. Go, okay. That's what I wanted to do anyway. We need to be awfully careful about that. Dan's brother, Mike, gives a great illustration of that I find absolutely humorous. And that he uses of this illustration. He uses this picture and he'll say, so-and-so says, if it's God's will to move somewhere, then someone will buy my house. And Mike comes up to him and says, I'll buy it for $1. Well, right? Oh, so we're negotiating with God for the price. We've got to be really careful how we present things. And sometimes we have the tendency to do that because it's really my will at the end of the day. It's not the humble approach. What does God want from me spiritually? It's how can I figure out a way to cloak it in spirituality. Oh yes, it's very spiritual what I'm doing. But really, you're just doing what you want. David here has men telling him, this is the right thing to do. Jesus' disciples, this is the right thing to do. They had the spiritual discernment to understand that's not the will of God. They will be humble and do God's will and reject false advising from even those who would be your Christian friends, your Christian confidants, the Christians who you would think you could trust. Be careful. They may not be leading you the right way. Have spiritual discernment. Not all opportunities our divine approval. And number 2, title of the lesson, don't take the shortcut. Do not take the shortcut. And what I mean by this is ultimately every temptation is a shortcut. Every temptation that is put before us is a shortcut. If you think about it, sin is ultimately a shortcut to get what you want now rather than waiting for how God has decided or decreed that it ought to be. We're going to get it now, we need it now, we want it now. We're not going to do it the way God says or wait for His time or His ways. I want it now. It's shortcutting the process. It's shortcutting the will of God. And I think that is an important picture. Think about sins like that. Lying is a shortcut, isn't it? That's what lying is all about, is shortcutting the consequences, shortcutting what might happen if I say the truth. You're just going to shortcut that right now. Anger is a shortcut. I need justice now. And I'm going to get it now. I'm not going to let God deal with it. I'm going to get it because I'm upset about what you've done. Anger is a shortcut. Sins are a shortcut. Sexual immorality is a shortcut. Sexual immorality is a shortcut from the will of God. Every sin is a shortcutting of God's process of what is His will for our lives. And I think it is so important to see that David seems to understand that he was not supposed to shortcut the process on the way to the throne. He would wait for God's timing. He wasn't going to take matters into his own hands. He has Saul at this moment. He could have killed Saul the next day, gone right into Gibeah or any other major city in Judah and say, I'm the king, Saul's dead. He didn't shortcut the process. How much is Jesus a picture of that? Jesus could have shortcutted the process. He could have come up out of the waters of baptism and said, I'm done, let's go. No, not going to the wilderness for temptation, definitely not going to a cross, not going to have 12 men follow me who don't understand what I'm doing. I'm certainly not going to have people try to mob me and kill me. Shortcut the process. Just get on to glory. He doesn't do it. For years, he suffers. For years, he deals with this treatment. For years, he goes through the pain. He could have just hurried up and get to the point. Get to the glory. Get to the throne. That's what Satan's offering. Let's just bypass this. Let's shortcut this. Just sit on the throne with me. And for us, the same thing is true. We aren't supposed to shortcut the process on the way to eternal glory. We talked a lot about that when we did our suffering series over the last couple of months of having faith and dealing with difficulties. It's very important to remember that trials, we aren't supposed to shortcut either. When we go through hard times, we're going through suffering, difficulties, temptations, trials, all of these pains that we are put into. But these are the moments that God is teaching us, refining us, changing us, transforming us, making us what God wants us to be. We cannot shortcut that process. You can't just end and go, I'm done, I'm not going to have it anymore. I'm going to get out of this, I'm going to change my circumstance, I'm going to fix all this and be done. We have a song, let him have his way with thee. I don't like the words of that song. Because that means I'm going to submit myself to the process and not shortcut what God is trying to do. I think we understand that Satan is going to offer to each and every one of us how he can fill every single desire you have. He'll let you shortcut everything. He'll let you shortcut all your pains, shortcut all your difficulties, all your challenges, all your sufferings. You can have all your desires right now. I'll just give them to you. Just do what I'm telling you to do. Just submit to it. Enjoy it. Cave in to your desires. And it's so important that we ultimately then pray for the wisdom to see past the shortcut. To really understand that when the temptation and the trial is right there before us, that God would give us not only the wisdom to see this as a shortcut that we are not to take, that we would have the humility to rely upon God's way. I'm going to do things God's way. I'm going to put it in God's hands. I'm going to let God deal with the circumstance. I'm not going to do what I want to do. It's not going to be my will. It's going to be God's will. And that we would always have the spiritual eyes that are mature enough to see that God's way is the way we want, rather than any shortcut that Satan could possibly put in front of us. One of the reasons why temptations are hard to avoid is because shortcuts sound easy. Who doesn't want the shortcut? Who doesn't want to just hurry up and get there? Why take the winding, long path? It goes all the way back to Egypt that God reminded them of that. God reminded them and said, I didn't take you the direct route right to the promised land for a couple of reasons. One, you were going to lose heart in return if you'd gone in and had to fight them right out the gate. The second, he said, I wanted to test your hearts. Well, I took you on this windy path all the way to the promised land. See if you'll trust me or not. God takes us on windy roads. And he takes us on long paths. And he takes us over difficult obstacles and rough roads to try to see if we're going to trust him or not. David is the anointed one. Why are we reading about him going through all of this suffering for the last 10 chapters? Because God takes us on windy roads to test our hearts, to prove our faith. Why does Jesus have to go for 30 years? Because God puts us on windy roads to test hearts. And he shows who we are through those difficulties. May we not take the shortcut. Let's go to God in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, how amazing it is to look at the life of David, your servant David, and his understanding of not seizing the moment, following through with his own will. God, give us a heart like that. And give us spiritual wisdom and maturity to see the temptations in front of us, to see when the opportunities in front of us are not your will. Help us to see that. Help us to see when the opportunities are our spiritual disaster. Give us that spiritual wisdom. Give us those spiritual eyes. Help us to be more clear in our spiritual thinking. That we would have the humility to seek you, seek your way, and that we would trust you to take us down these difficult paths. God, strengthen our faith. Give us the spiritual courage that we need. As we struggle with temptations, we go through suffering. It is easy for us to grow weary and to lose heart. Please uphold our faith. Strengthen our hearts. Give us what we need to be able to continue to trust you. Show us the way to your glory, Lord, and help us that we would make the right decisions to follow you every single day and every day ahead. In Jesus' name. It's an invitation song. We invite you to come to Jesus now. Turn away from your sins.